Hi, Michael. It's Friday, May 8th, 2020, and we're using Zoom to record an interview because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so we are keeping our distance. Um, Michael Trazoff, you were involved with the workshop center, I think at its beginning. Am I right?
That's correct.
So can you talk about it and talk about working with Lillian Weber, and how did your work at the workshop center influence your teaching life?
Well, it had an enormous influence over me. I guess I met Lillian Weber when I was a student at City College, undergraduate.
Hmm.
I don't recollect if there was a particular class I took or she was just in charge of student teaching. But I had a placement in, I guess, what is it, PS 141, was that it? The 144?
144, probably on 122nd Street.
That's correct. And I was there with a couple of other student teachers, and some of the teachers were receptive to this open corridor situation or open classroom situation. We were lucky. There was actually a isolated corridor off the cafeteria where there were 4 classrooms, and 2 of each connected. So it worked out very, very well there. I guess trying to think of who the established teachers were, but I only remember the kindergarten teacher was Vicki Goldman, and the pre-K teacher was Gladys. I can't remember her last name.
Hmm.
That may have been when I was already teaching.
What year was this?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it took me quite a while to get out of undergraduate school. I graduated high school in '60, and I think I graduated in 1970. So it's possible this was '70 or '71.
Okay, so it was after the strike, for instance, the 68
Yes,
strike.
yes.
And
And as a matter of fact, Ken Friedlander, who I sort of co-taught with, we had a connecting classroom. He came from Ocean Brownsville.
okay, okay.
He
So
was
one
a
of the
teacher, and I don't know
district
if I wrote.
District 23, and one of the starting points of the UFT strike against community control.
Yes, and Debbie Meyer was always heavily involved in the union, and I guess I got introduced to her. I cannot remember who was the actual teacher I was student teaching under.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know why, but I eventually took his probably her place.
Hmm.
I was the only male, I think, kindergarten teacher in Manhattan, and I became a kindergarten teacher there. And while I was going for my master's, I think there was also an influential professor at City College named Miriam Dorn.
I loved her. Absolutely adored her. Yeah.
Yeah, she was very, very nice to us and very encouraging. And Lillian, of course, was extremely encouraging. And I found that before all this happened, I had a job as a Head Start, some kind of assistant on the Lower East Side,
Hmm.
Rivington and Pitt Street. And the woman I met there, who was really a major influence in my life, was named Happy Byers.
Oh, okay.
She's out, I think, in the state of Washington on the West Coast. I don't know if she's still alive or not. I tried to contact her over the years, but I've failed. But she just was brilliant.
Mm.
And she encouraged me to go to college. She encouraged me to go back to City College. To me, it was a very natural way of teaching. Whatever space there was, you used it.
Hmm.
Uh, we would go out with Debbie. She knew all the nights when furniture, et cetera, was placed by the curb for pickup. We would get rugs and who knows. We had lovely furnished classrooms.
Hmm.
In my room, I actually built a loft off the wardrobe, and which was a very quiet place. We had some puzzles up there, a little aquarium, and if kids wanted a quiet area, they climbed up there. And to me, it was just an easy way of dealing with children and teaching. We had very few restrictions. I don't ever remember handing in a lesson plan. The custodians were nice to us after they shut all the, there was like a master switch to shut off all the electricity in that corridor. And we came back one weekend and a lot of animals we had were dead. Some were frozen in their tanks. I mean, so after that, I just said, look, can you not do that? And they were very cooperative. I asked them for a broom and dustpans. They said, why? I said, well, we'll clean the rooms up every day. You just have to come in once a week. Ah, they were delighted with that. And that's what we did. And we had everything on wheels. We used to wheel stuff out into the corridor. It was a nice corridor, probably about 100 feet long at least. It worked out very, very well. Like I say, we had very, very little to do with the act. I had very little to do with the actual school. I guess Debbie ran interference for us for that. But we never really met any resistance from anyone. I'm sure people looked at us like we were crazy, but it was fine.
And Debbie, at that time, Deborah was an advisor, a co-teacher. What was her role at PS 144?
Good question. I think she ran the program. I don't think she actually had a classroom. She went from room to room, dealt with parents. Her parents sometimes gave her a tough time. There were some politically active parents that she dealt with, and she was always chasing after some kid. You see a coat flying down the street over there. She took the brunt of, I guess, all of that stuff. And she was very, very smart about things, but somewhat disorganized at times. But things fell into place, and the four of us, the four teachers over there, Ken, myself, Vicki, and Gladys, got along. Gladys was a very traditional pre-K teacher, but she enjoyed what we were doing, and we were all fairly friendly during the school day, and friendly outside the school. We, trying to remember, what we did was, I liked building blocks. And there were just a regular set of, I guess, Carolyn Pratt building blocks. Those beautiful maple.
Yeah, unit blocks.
Yeah. So I said, you know, I must have asked the school secretary, who was always very nice to us. Her name was Carolyn. I said, where are all the building blocks? I mean, there's like an elementary school. They said, oh, the teachers, they lock them up because they don't want kids to throw them. That's all I had to do was hear that. I went around to the school. I collected every building block in the school. We must have had over 1,000 blocks. And we had, there may have been a fifth room between us, between Ken and myself. I don't really remember the physical layout, to be honest with you, but that became the building block room. And kids built Monday through Friday. Nothing had to be taken down at the end of the day. And they built tremendous things. And Ken probably has pictures of all these things somewhere. And from that, we did a lot of language arts stuff. The first signs that went up was, I remember this, no sorry. So I said to the kids, what does that mean, no sorry? That means when someone knocks down your building, they can't say they're sorry. And so they had whole cities built up. It was terrific. And I don't know if, I'm sure you've seen these things where guys set up these dominoes and you push one down and they all fall down.
Sure. Well,
we had a couple of kids who were really brilliant with this kind of thing. And they would set up these things with blocks. And it would go out into the car. They'd use hundreds of blocks and they would push one down and they would all fall down. They got a big kick out of it. And it was great.
So how long did you teach at 144?
That did not last that long. I can't put a time limit on years, but I know we all then moved up to on the Upper East Side there to, what was it, 171, I think?
171, yeah, 130.
Yeah, all of us moved there. Lucy, Vivian, I guess, came with us. Gladys didn't. I don't think Vicky did. Ken. How long were we there? It had to be a couple of years for sure, at least.
So a different question. When you went to school, I'm assuming this wasn't the way you were taught.
I went to a very traditional school. I grew up in an area called East New York in Brooklyn. I went to kindergarten. My parents lived there until I was about 12 years old, and then they moved out to South Farmingdale, Long Island.
Okay.
So yeah, I had a very traditional education. I had a very strict mother. You might even say she was a fanatic. I had to have perfect penmanship on my homework. It was still inkwells then, no ballpoint pens. And God forbid if I got a smudge on the homework, she just literally ripped the page out of those wonderful marbled, sewn together notebooks and start over again.
Mm.
Did have indeed a traditional education. No two ways about that.
So can you talk about what influenced you to make this kind of change to a much more natural way of working with kids?
When I was in this Head Start program with Happy,
Mm-hmm.
it was set up like a big playground that had a dress-up area. And I hadn't had anything to do with children at that level ever in my life. And they was just having so much fun. And I could see, and it was probably maybe 4 or 5 year olds. It was a mixed age group.
Mm-hmm.
Kids all, it was like older kids helping little kids. It just seemed such a natural way to me. It was, and apparently in Happy Byers' eyes, I was a natural.
Mm.
And she was very, very encouraging. She said, you got to go to City College. You got to get a degree. You have to teach. She said, you're cut out. And at that time, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just, I was working here and there. I had jobs. And if you really want a little backstory on how I wound up over there, I don't know if I told you this last time we met so long ago. I don't know if you want to hear this or not.
I do, yeah.
Well, I got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning. I have no idea to this day how this happened. It said, go to this school, and gave me an address in Harlem. I had enough money for a couple of tokens to go on the train. As I walked through Harlem, all the kids were saying, are you the new teacher? Are you the new teacher? I said, I had no idea what was going on. Now, by the way, at that point, I had a very long red beard and very long hair. And I wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I look like Rasputin. I go to this school, and I have no idea what to do. So I find the office. Someone directs me to the office. The secretary looks at me, and she was just one of these dynamic women who had seen everything and been around forever. And she said, what are you doing, blah, blah. And I said, I don't know, I got a phone call to come here. I don't have any idea why. I like to work with children, I think, and she said, go down to 110 Livingston Street. I said, where's that? No idea what was going on. Completely no idea. We had to go. She said, do you have money for tokens? I said, no, I have one token to get home again. I don't have any money. She said, here's 2 tokens. She told me how to get there. I spent the entire day there till about, keep in mind, I got to Harlem before 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I took a tuberculosis test and an X-ray. I mean, it was like going into the military, I guess. I had no idea what was going on. And they sent me to the school in the Lower East Side in Remington and Pitt Street. And I got there around 2 o'clock, and I met Happy Byers. And I explained to her how I got there. And she said, no problem. And she showed me what she said. I said, what do you want me to do? She said, anything you want.
Oh, my goodness.
I sat on the floor with the kids, and I watched them play, and I played with them. And she said, come here tomorrow day. And I was there for the summer, I guess. And it was a phenomenal experience. And I decided to apply to City College. That's how I got started.
It's amazing what gives shape.
To this day, I have no idea how that happened. I could never figure out how somebody called me, why they called me. Just amazing.
It is. And so with Happy Byers, you learned on the job.
Yes.
And she gave you direction and pushed you up to City College.
Very, very, couldn't be more encouraging.
And then at City College, that's when you met Lillian Weber.
Eventually.
And it sounds, was it by accident, or did someone steer you there?
Well, I knew, I had 2 years previous of college, many years ago at the University of Miami. And I left there. It was just not for me. And I'm trying to think, I guess I wanted to work with kids, but my joke was that I would matriculate and graduate at the same time. I took all kinds of classes. But when I finally got to be a senior and they let me student teach, that's when I met Lillian.
Okay. And she was your supervisor.
Yes.
And I just wonder, I'm jealous because I never had her as a supervisor, but I'm wondering what it was like to have her as a supervisor.
The word that occurs to me when I started as student teach was I was a stalking horse for her. If she had an idea, she would tell me how to implement it. And I didn't mind. She had great ideas.
Hmm.
And I became very creative with whatever was in the classroom. I mean, it was just so, like I said, it was such an easy fit for me. It was great. And I remember there was another guy who was a student teacher. His name was Frank Storaci or something like that. I'm not sure of his name. He would come in a suit every day,
Hmm.
shirt, and there I was. I mean, I had coveralls on. I mean, I had no
And
money.
and your red beard and your long hair.
Yeah, I was the epitome, I was the exact opposite, polar opposite. And I'm on the floor all day long. I'm in overalls, and parents are looking at me. They would come in, and kids would be corn rolling my hair, and they were, what is this guy doing here? But I got along very well with the parents. I got along very well with the, whatever I had to. And Lillian would come with other people and observe me and see what was going on and make various suggestions. And I guess I had to write whatever I had to write, and I did. But she was always chock full of ideas, and all those ideas seemed very, very natural to me.
And this was at 144 where you student taught?
Yes,
Okay. And it was a kindergarten class.
I believe it was, yes.
Okay.
Again, actually could have been Debbie's class.
Ah,
As a matter of fact, it had to have been her class because I probably took her place and allowed her to be the supervisor of the whole situation.
hmm.
And she had a lot of there was a woman, I think there was a woman named Cecilia. I'm not sure. She was a teacher in a private Catholic girls' school up in Connecticut somewhere, I think.
Hmm.
I'm really pulling some memories out over here. And she had some workshops for us, like overnight workshops. I remember Ken and I swimming in a pool at midnight up there and stuff like that. But she had been to England too.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, I think she was British.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very helpful in, explaining how you could do this and do that. To me, it was such a simple thing to divide a room up into areas, and that was probably Lillian's idea, or Debbie's, I'm not sure. But once we did that, things took off. I mean, to me, there was such an easy way of doing things. And we just sort of fell into it. I mean, Debbie, of course, knew a lot more than I would ever know, probably. And Ken and I just happened to get along, and Vicky sort of fell into it. And like I say, Gladys was all right, but because of the open corridor, the children were allowed to wander around, which was very important for kids. They didn't have to sit at a desk. As a matter of fact, the only desk I had in my classroom was it was a typewriter. Now we would call it a large font typewriter. It was a primitive typewriter with very, very large letters, for lack of font was huge. And the only rule we tried to have was one finger for one hand at a time. So people didn't just go, just into the ground. We had a guy who repaired them on a regular basis who was a wonderful man who sort of became a hero of mine, but a different story. But that was the only desk in the room. We had rugs, we had couches, we had easy chairs. I mean, we had wet sand, dry sand. We had animals everywhere. Ken and I had all kinds of connections to zoos and private collectors. I had, you name it, we had it in the classroom. Birds, snakes, iguanas, lizards. I mean, the kids loved them.
Mm-hmm.
Loved them. What we did was we had a recorder attached next to every animal, and we encouraged kids to say whatever they saw, and then we would write it up, and we would say, here, read this. I can't read. Well, just exactly what you said. Never corrected grammar, never corrected spelling. I still have some of the books that Ken and I put together. We would, once a day, maybe at the end of the day, Ken was much more into photography, and he had all these photography books, and he put a picture up on the blackboard. It was never a straightforward picture of anything. And the kids would write what it was. And we found a laminating machine in the basement of the school, and a bookbinding machine. And we would make books for kids, and the parents loved them. Just loved them. And I still have some of those. They were just fabulous.
Oh man,
Picture of,
that's a real treasure trove there.
there was a picture of pig snouts sticking out through I guess, a pen, a pig pen.
Hmm.
Well, one kid who used to go down south every summer to visit his grandparents knew exactly what it was. No one else had a clue. He had all kinds of crazy ideas. It was great. It was just great. And we were able to do things like that.
Yeah, and you're still smiling about it 50 years later.
Yeah. We answered to no one. You know, it was such a wonderful feeling. I wouldn't last 2 seconds in it. Both my daughters-in-law are teachers.
Hmm.
And what they do, I could never do. They're so organized. They could do lessons. There's one's an administrator now, the other one's still teaching. But I mean, I just wouldn't be able to survive in a structure like that.
Yeah,
We had ferrets in the classroom. We had every animal you could imagine in the classroom.
ferrets. My goodness. So you spent a couple of years at 144,
Right.
and I'm curious about what your relationship was with Lillian after she, the supervision ended and you became a classroom teacher. She still came and visited you?
That's a very good question, Bruce. I'm trying to recollect. I don't know if Lillian and Debbie were still close to each other. If Lillian ever visited us at 171. Wow. I don't know.
Mm,
I know I was probably still in touch with her because I went right from getting my undergraduate degree. I enrolled in a master's program.
hmm. And the master's program was at the workshop center, with the workshop center?
I just think it was Miriam Dawn's. She ran the early child. My master's was in early childhood education.
Oh, okay.
Do that. I'm
Okay.
sure I'm correct about that. And I'm pretty sure I still was in touch with Lillian about that because she also liked me and I liked her, and anything that we could, try together and see how it worked out, we did. I got to be honest, I don't remember her being in the second school.
Hmm.
Have been, but I just don't remember it.
It's an interesting story because I've spoken to Deb about it a couple of times, and when Deborah Meyer talked to Lillian Weber about starting Central Park East, Lillian didn't fully agree with it. She felt that starting a school that was a magnet school that drew progressive parents, active parents out of the neighborhood school would weaken the kind of push to make the neighborhood school more progressive. And so they never fully resolved that. But Deborah said that Lillian did visit from time to time.
Well, she was my supervisor. She had to have visited.
Yeah.
I remember being observed by her many times, and she would bring lots of people with her.
But this was at PS 144.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Like I say, I don't have a memory of her being at the other school,
Yeah. Okay.
and I'm not even sure. I don't know why we left that school. I don't remember. I don't know if it was a political situation or Debbie thought there were greener pastures at 171. I really can't remember.
Hmm. I think one of the things that happened was, I don't know if you remember Bonnie Brownstein. I may have asked you about that. But
Yes.
yeah, right. She was working in District 4, and Anthony Alvarado was a 32-year-old new superintendent in
Great
District
guy.
4. Yeah. And he needed to, because of the decentralization law, I think it was passed in 1969, the floor of, you needed to have 20,000 students in a school district for it to remain a viable school district. And I think District 4 fell underneath that. People got out of the district if they could. And so he was looking for ways to start programs that would attract students back into the schools. And he made an offer to Deborah Meyer to say, hey, if you have some people you'd like to work with, start a school. I'll give you the support. And I think that's what brought her to PS 171.
There was lots of progressive people in that district. There was a principal whose name escapes me. he ran a whole school sort of based on that. So he ran a very, very well-run school over there. I cannot remember his name or where he was,
Hmm.
but I know that we were the only ones doing an open corridor, but there were very progressive people about how to educate children. And so that makes sense that that's why we wound up over there.
Yeah. And
It was
District
really a
4 was a
very,
kind
very
of a
smart.
mecca for people.
Yeah, he was a very smart guy, Anthony Alvarado. I remember that. He was very, very smart about how to do things and how to get things done. And I think he was very successful at that.
Yeah. So there, just from hearing you, there are people that I want to try to find where they are and what they're doing, like Happy Buyers, for instance. I know she was at the workshop center often up at City College.
She was, if you find her, I would love to say hi. She was a wonderful person. She really, really was, and also quite brilliant. There was no grass growing under her feet, believe me.
Mm.
She understood children. That was the whole thing about why I think I flourished so much and so well was both Debbie and Lily, and well, three, not both, but and Happy, they had an innate understanding of children.
Mm.
And sort of in different ways. Debbie certainly had an intellectual understanding of how children learned.
Mm.
And that rubbed off on Ken and I. At that time, Piaget was still alive. And I'm sure you are, right? So he actually lectured. We went to a lecture in Manhattan, and then we drove to Philadelphia and saw him again. That was really cool. And we did all kinds of Piagetian things in the classroom, which I'll tell you about if you want to hear. But Lillian was more on I think she wanted to back up everything and show that no matter what you did, it was an example of children learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Happy was as well. And I benefit from that enormously because when a parent would come in, Ken and I would cook all the time. Pre-microwave days, what did we use? A kiln.
Mm. Really?
Ken's wife at that point was a potter. And she had a studio, I guess, with a friend of hers a couple of blocks away from where Debbie lived in the 70s. So we set up, we were always doing pottery stuff. I still have a couple of things that I made. I never glazed, but I still have them. Anyway, that's how we used to cook. We used to make Irish soda bread all the time because it was very easy to make and it was, So parents would come and say, what are you doing? We were always mixing stuff up and food coloring. And I said, look, that's physics. I said, what do you mean it's physics? I said, look, first you have something that's water, it's a liquid, then you freeze it, it's a solid, then you can melt it again or make it, and they said, no, that's math. And I said, look at these building blocks. I said, one is double the size of to me, it was a piece of cake. I had no problem explaining why I was doing all these crazy things. And they were fine with it. And I didn't, they overlooked how I looked. There was always a big debate with whether I was a hippie or not. Now, Ken was teaching the first, second grade. I was teaching kindergarten, first grade, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And his kids, there was a big debate all the time. Is he a hippie? But Ken was more a traditionally looking guy, but his mind was way out there. And they said, well, he's got long hair and this and that. He's got a beard. Look how he dresses. And then someone else said, yeah, but he works here. He has a job. And it was so confusing to them. I never said anything. I just let it run however it ran. It was cool. And it was a great deal of fun. And like I said, those three women sort of guided me and helped me to, I guess, to flourish with whatever ideas I had. Mm. And I did. I invented games left and right. And Ken and I were very, very inventive with stuff. Here's just an example. I lived in the village then. And I come home one day and I see there's a dumpster around the corner from where I live. And it's full of heels, shoe heels. And I knew, it was a small neighborhood. I said, what are you doing? He says, they raised the rent. I got to get out of here. I said, well, why aren't you taking this with you? Why are you throwing it out for? He says, it's cheaper to throw it out than to move it. So I said, do you mind if I take some? He says, take some. He says, you can have everything in that dumpster if you want. I started bringing, every day a carton of heels to school. It was, schlepping tons of heels. What do? How many, we had those Kentile floors, those squares, I think they were 12 by 12. How many heels fit in a square? How many heels long is the classroom? You write your name with heels. Is this heel bigger or smaller than these? I mean, just how it went. Ken and I would find animals, and we had, like I said, we had everything in the world in the classroom. But anything like that we could do, we did. We had milk boxes. We had a nice yard. It was a yard that the other rest of the school didn't use. They used the big main yard. We had a little yard off of this.
Right on 103rd Street.
Oh, it was fabulous. There was a sliding pond there. We call it a sliding pond. Just a long metal slide. Somehow, I don't remember how this happened. Well, Ken and I bought a lot of tires. We would just stop by a gas station. We had truck tires. Kids would get inside the tires and roll each other. It was crazy. But some kids somehow figured out that if you went down the slide in a milk box, which was crazy, how far could you go? So we had plastic milk boxes, wooden milk boxes, and metal milk boxes. And we started to make graphs. Of course, Ken and I never missed an opportunity to do something with anything. And it turned out that if it was raining and there were leaves on the ground, the metal milk boxes went the furthest. I'm sure we'd be locked up today for doing something like this. It was kids sitting in a milk box being pushed down a slide. That's what we did. It was fabulous. Kids learned all the time, and the custodians liked us so much. There was also a really nice piece of land over there that the custodians would give us fertilizer, and we had a garden. And there wasn't too many things you could grow between the end of May and June, but we managed to grow like some hybrid carrots and some radishes, a little bit of lettuce sometime. Of course, sometimes people jumped over the fence and they picked our veggies before we did, but we had fresh salads at the very end of June. We did a lot of neat stuff like that. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun anyway. We would get there at the crack of dawn, Ken and I, to set up a classroom. We had, for painting, I don't even know who came up with the idea. My idea was I was a paper hanger. That's how I made my living for quite a while. 4x8 piece of plywood covered with like patent leather, very shiny substance, easy to clean. And we had creamers, glass creamers, and glass casters that you would put under the wheels or stuff of furniture. Kids pour in whatever color they wanted, or we would do it for them. A different paintbrush for each color, and then they would paint. So they would paint on a flat surface versus an easel up like this where the paint would always run unless you were really an exceptional artist. And we had great paintings. What did we do with those paintings? We framed them. How did we frame them? Somehow, and I don't know how we found these things out. There was a guy who had a mat board factory somewhere in the depths of Brooklyn. And he also had dumpsters full of stuff. And he paid a lot of money to have those dumpsters taken away. Now, when they make mat boards, I found out, if you have picking arbitrary numbers, a 12 by 12 inch frame, they punch that out and they throw the punch out away. It was a gold mine. This guy never had to pay for a dumpster again. We had 20 or 30 Volkswagen buses lined up, just shoveling this stuff in there. I mean, I thought the bottoms were going to fall out of Ken's VW bus. And he gave it sometime the punch out of the frame was the exact size of newsprint paper. We framed kids' painting and hung it up out in the hall. I mean, couldn't have been better. And it was just and I think the kids loved it. We certainly liked it. After a while, the parents loved it because they would say to us, Mr. Trazoff, if my son doesn't behave, you can hit him. I said, I can't hit anybody. I said, that's not right. So they said, well, I hit him. I said, well, you're the other parent. You can do what you want. But in my classroom, I said, not only I won't hit him, but no one's allowed to hit him. And then what happened was they would tell me, well, we don't have to hit him sometime. All we have to do is tell them they can't go to school. And then they'll behave. I said, that's a wonderful idea, I said. So there were parents who would threaten their kids, I won't send you to school. You can't make these things up. So kids really liked it. We liked it. We had a great time.
I think we'll stop here, Michael. Thank you so much for all this. There are some things, I know you mentioned that you had stories about Piaget. I'd love to hear those too, maybe another time if it's okay with you.
Anytime you like. We have a lot of time.
We do. Okay, thanks, Michael. Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay, in the first interview, you said that there were no restraints. And I think that that was in reference to teaching at PS 144, but it also may apply to teaching at Central Park East in those first years. Um, so if that's accurate, can you talk about how did you know? I don't believe that teachers need restraints from on top, but I do want to ask this: how did you know what you wanted to teach?
It, that's a great question. I just had the feeling from watching and playing and observing the children that it was definitely a language deficit. It was a, what's the word, paucity of language.
Mm.
And I knew it would be, I just wanted to, I guess the word is enrich their environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That was what I was really concentrating on.
It's interesting you say enrich their environment because my memory and the things that I've read about Lillian Weber, when she came back from England, one of her major points was that the environment in the infant schools in England was so rich, especially rich compared to what classrooms were like in the United States. And all of the work she did with open corridors and so on was to help teachers to enrich their environments.
I'm sure I got that from her. I plagiarized it, no doubt.
No. I think that's a good thing. It's a good connection.
Yeah, no, I'm very sure because, and that's really what we, to me, it was an easy thing to do, and that's really what we did. The classrooms are very stark, desks all lined up in a row, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I had one desk in my classroom so kids could type, and we had areas. It just seemed, again, an easy thing to do, and the kids loved it. The kids absolutely loved it. And I was fortunate in that I was able to mine, for lack of a better word, my environment and get terrific things. For instance, and you had to validate this to parents, not so much the administration. They really had a hands-off attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Ken and I went down into the basement and we found these old, I don't know if you've ever seen them, these spelling books. Yeah, they had words in them, but they were tabulated, A, B, C, D, and they had blanks. I love these things. Every time a child would come up with a new word, I would write it in there. It was like a written, I didn't date it, but it was like a written record of how their vocabulary kept in. And the parents would come in, and parents did come in.
Mm-hmm.
First, nobody came in, but parents would come in. And we had a policy, you can come in anytime you wanted. Anytime in the daytime, if you want to see us after school, before school started, etc. It was such a nice way of showing, look, your kids are learning.
Yeah.
They're learning.
Yeah.
Now, again, I was very curious. Ken was very curious. It's Piagetian things. We were doing stuff which made it difficult for anybody to evaluate whether they were really learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the classic example is Ken's up on top of the wardrobe. He was very, very brilliant with this. He would go up there for days on end with a video camera with nothing in it. After a while, kids paid no attention to him, and he knew that. So when he did start videoing, it was very natural. The classic Piagetian thing is, what holds more liquid? We use the lunchroom tray and a beaker.
Mm-hmm.
A lunchroom tray holds like gallons of water, but who knows that, right? And we did a lot of stuff like that. We just ripped him off left and right, and the kids loved it. No, this holds more water. And we were observed literally from people all over the world.
Mm.
And one of the people who observed us were the people that did the SATs from Princeton. And we had a long talk with them. And I said, you're going to have a problem because this is not a standard way of learning. This is not a standard way of evaluating, but you can see, and they were favorable towards us, what's going on. And they actually, and I have the galley somewhere, they spent time observing us and they wrote us up. And somewhere I have how they thought they could implement that into an evaluation kind
I
of thing.
hope you have those galleys someplace where you can put your finger on them.
I'm pretty sure I know where they are. I'm not 100% sure. It's just a small, paragraph or two in a whole.
Sure.
They sent us the whole thing. It was a book that they were published.
Do you remember Ted Chittenden from that time?
Say the name again?
Edward Chittenden. He came from ETS, and it just sounds like you had a major influence in helping to shape the way he looked at how children learn, because he went on to document using video, for instance, over years at Central Park East, and wrote up a lot of the observations that he did.
The name sounds familiar, but if he was to appear in front of me, I don't think I would recognize him.
It's been a while.
And the other thing was, I don't know if I did this or who did this. Debbie said, you have to keep records. You've got to keep records. How do you keep records of these? I mean, we were doing all kinds of stuff. It was clear to us that kids were learning. So somebody, again, I don't know who did this. Let's just put all these things like in these manila folders, which we had plenty of. Oh, the problem is, where do you put the manila folders? I'm pretty sure this is my idea. I'm tooting my horn here. Milk boxes. Fit into milk boxes perfectly. Had milk boxes full of folders that went on for years, I think. Lucy will tell you, I think we had years of observations that went into these things.
Yeah.
And it was portable. It didn't weigh too much. It had handles. And that's how I think we kept a lot of records of children. Versus
they became portfolios of children's work.
There you go.
Yeah. It was a gold mine for people like me who came in and took kids in the 5th and 6th grade, but we could go back and see the work that they had been doing over time.
We were pretty good about documenting that in our own way, I think. And non-standard, but clearly very, very, I thought, a smart and easy to understand way of what children were doing. We had a problem with certain kids in this open situation where they could not deal without structure. I had to write a master's thesis, and I was terrible at statistics. I mean, I was a psych major, and I changed I couldn't pass a stat course, so I became more into teaching. But what I did was I developed what I called an observational instrument. It turned out to be a godsend. This was simply a list of all the areas, who sent someone there, what time they went in and what time they left, and a little comment on the side. Like I say, Ken and I had some kids, they really needed structure. So we had these very small clipboards, not these big ones. They fit on like maybe a 5 by 8, maybe even smaller. We said, let's clipboard these kids. It worked out phenomenal. It worked out so well that everybody wanted to be clipboarded. We had to go out and buy 50 or 60 clipboards. Everybody wanted it. They used to come up to us, and it was great for the student teachers. We had a lot of student teachers. At any rate, the clipboard thing turned out to be the funniest thing in the world. Another very easy way of keeping tabs and records on how long kids spent in each area, small anecdotal note what they did. Turned out to be a great thing. Who would have thought it? It's for kids that needed structure, every kid loved it. Every kid loved it. So that was another record keeping thing that was, just sort of fell into our lap, so to speak.
For you, it was always the early grades that you worked with.
Yeah, I don't think I ever hit 2nd grade. I was always a K1, I think. Maybe when we went, it was 1 and 2 moved, but never above the 2nd grade. Well, I don't think the program extended above the 2nd grade for a while. That was the area we had. We didn't have any more rooms to expand it.
I have a loaded question for you now.
Sure.
How do you think Lillian Weber and working at the workshop and your experiences at the workshop center helped to shape the teacher you became?
1,000%. There's no doubt about it. I was a blob of clay and she molded me. Let's make it easy. She took whatever she saw in me and refined it. As much in those days as a guy like me could be refined.
Diamond in the rough then, I guess.
Not even a diamond. I don't want to give myself too much credit. A stone, a rolling stone, believe me. But she saw, like Happy, something in me. And like I say, if she had an idea, she said, let's try this. And she would present it to me and she would tell me how to present it. And I don't know if there was ever anything she talked to me about that I disagreed with. It was just that kind of a relationship. I had a great deal of respect for her. I think she respected me. And it was just a lovely relationship. So I think she was after Happy, she was just an enormous influence. So
And Happy was at Bank Street, I think, wasn't she?
Happy taught at Bank Street for I don't know. Yeah, I think when she was running that Head Start program on the Lower East Side, that was in the summertime. She may have been for sure. She taught classes at Bank Street as well. I don't know if it was at the same time or whatever. My relationship with Happy went on for years, way after I was done teaching. I think the guy that was there, the janitor, let's call him, that was there, was an elderly black guy who was a wonderful, wonderful man. He had he had must have been a southerner because when I could get him to talk to the kids, which was sometimes he's a very shy guy, he would talk about how you knew the man Robin because he had a little bow tie under his beak. I mean, stuff like that. And one day, a kid made a snowball and put a rock in it and hit him in the back. His name was Lonnie. That was his name.
Lonnie? Okay.
Lonnie was the custodian's name. And I don't remember the name of the child that hit him. It was like water off a duck's back for Lonnie. I never saw him lose his temper. He was always a sweet, sweet guy. As a matter of fact, the guy that ran the custodial staff used to go golfing with him. He said the guy was a natural golfer. He couldn't believe it. Never held a golf club in his life, and he was like almost off. At any rate, I decided for doing this, he would have to go down into the basement and work with Lonnie 1 hour a day. I couldn't get him out of the basement. I couldn't get him out of the basement. He was pleading with me. He was pleading with me. I figured it maybe last 2 or 3 days. He'd be dying to come back into the classroom. He never wanted to come back into the classroom. It was a coal-burning school.
Yeah.
It was a coal.
Yeah.
And Lonnie would wet the coal down for hours. And if there were like anything wood in the streets, police barriers, a desk that was out in the hallway that someone forgot to put back in, like us, got chopped up for firewood. This guy was a maniac for wood. And he was such a nice guy. And I couldn't get this kid back in the classroom. It took me like a week or two to get him back into the classroom. And I said, Lonnie, you got to help me over here because, no, he says, I understand. And eventually he walked him in and he said, you could, we worked out a visitation. It was unbelievable. And I said, you could go down if you behave. And his whole behavior changed. Foggy for there, I guess. And it was really interesting what went on down there. I was certainly interested in it. And I was like I said, the school, we did not meet with a lot of antagonism. And that was extremely helpful. You talk about restraints, and parameters. They were flexible, and I thought people were pretty supportive of us. Now, the population at 171 was much more integrated than at 144. There were white kids, Hispanics, black kids, and it worked out great. I thought it was wonderful. The whole idea to me of school and education is that's the great leveling field for everyone. If you can give children an education and a positive experience in learning, that's how you change society. Because then they can think, they can create. And I always felt, I have no idea why I felt this way, that each child had something that they were brilliant at. And it was sort of my job to figure out what that was. I didn't always succeed. I couldn't always find it. But I always felt that each child had really something that they just could sparkle at, that they could shine. Some kids were great with math. There was a kid whose father ran a after-hours club. He was great with numbers. He knew dice games, card games. He was fabulous with numbers. And there was a kid that could play chess.
So let's stop. But at some point, when you want to talk some more, I'm going to record it. Is that okay?
Anytime. I find this very enjoyable.